Huggy Wuggy, one of the most iconic characters of Playtime Co. Or rather, the most iconic and legendary one is one of the characters that theory creators like me most suspected would return in Chapter 4. Although I had my doubts, friends, my personal theory was a complete success. Huggy Wuggy did come back, but we can't stop there. Now the question is how? How did he survive that deadly fall? And even more, if we look closely, his body has such severe injuries that you can even see his organs, and his skull is cracked open too. Yet, the fact that he can still move with a body so damaged makes me wonder, does Huggy Wuggy even feel pain? One of the coolest, most interesting, and quite unexpected surprises we got to see in Chapter 4 of Poppy Playtime is the return of Huggy Wuggy, or Experiment 1170, who appears in the final scene of the game, right before the player enters the underground laboratories where all the experiments took place. We can see that Huggy Wuggy is not only alive, but now seems to be more ferocious and aggressive than ever. Upon recognizing the protagonist, he roars and attacks the door and the small window, separating them in a brutal way. This is because there was pretty clear evidence in the previous chapters that Huggy Wuggy was still alive. And since this became a reality, and as many of you requested, I want to explain in this video how Huggy Wuggy really survived and came back. We'll quickly review the evidence we saw about this in Chapter 2. And I also want to explain to you why, unlike other experiments, this one wasn't assimilated or destroyed by the prototype. So without further ado, let's get started. As we can see during the climax of Chapter 1 of Poppy Playtime, Huggy Wuggy reveals himself to the protagonist, attacks him, and chases him brutally through the factory in an area with giant machinery used to create toys. Eventually, Huggy Wuggy corners the player in an area near the room where the Poppy doll is located. It's here that the player throws a very heavy box at Huggy Wuggy, causing the floor to break and making the creature fall into the deepest part of the factory. Something very curious is that Huggy Wuggy crashes into the beams and pipes present in that area, which leaves him quite injured and hurt from the fall. However, we don't see him directly again during the events of Chapter 2. Curiously, in that same chapter, after obtaining 2 of the 3 codes needed to get the train working and escape the factory, we can find something fascinating in the water treatment plant. On the walls and pipes of this area, there are bloodstains and blue fur from Huggy Wuggy, indicating that after falling from the highest point, he ended up in this part of the factory where the Bunzo dolls were made. He was badly injured from all the blows he took, and after crashing one last time into one of the pipes, which stopped his fall, he escaped through the nearby ducts. Although he left blood, fur, and evidence of his presence, we didn't see him directly after that. For this reason, many fans thought he was dead and had been found and assimilated by the prototype. Fortunately, that's not really the case. As we can see in the climax of Chapter 4, after the death or defeat of Dr. Sawyer and Doughy the Doman, there's a powerful explosion while we're with Poppy and Kissy Missy in some special sewers. It's here that we fall, and we don't know what really happened to Kissy Missy or Poppy, since she left the area shortly before the explosion. This happens after the prototype confesses his true intentions, revealing that he had lied to Poppy all along and even threatened her. Thus, the player falls into the caverns, reaching the deepest underground level of the Playtime Co facilities, the laboratories, the true home of the prototype. Here, it's implied in an unexpected, macabre, yet exciting way that the orphaned children might be there, asleep in some sort of special hibernation that the prototype is keeping them in, though this hasn't been 100% confirmed. At the entrance to this special area of the laboratories, we notice that there are many poppy flowers blooming, healthy and alive, showing that someone or something, perhaps the prototype, has been taking care of them and keeping them alive, possibly using them for some purpose. We can theorize that the prototype uses these flowers and plants to create his own red smoke, similar to catnaps, with which he has kept the children asleep all this time. That's why he keeps the gardens in that condition. In this area, we find a VHS tape from Leith Pierre, where he comments that if you're lost and have ended up in this place, the best thing to do is ask for help in the nearby laboratories. However, he then admits that if they find someone who isn't part of the team, they'll shoot them without hesitation and kill them on the spot, because everything done in the laboratories is confidential and extremely secret. After playing this tape and it ends, a special alarm goes off, and we see the main security system activate as well. It's then that, from a nearby door, the silhouette of what at first seems to be Kissy Missy emerges. But upon hearing his characteristic roar, we realize it's actually Huggy Wuggy. He fiercely attacks the door, trying to take down the intruder as quickly as possible. In a very interesting way, we notice that once the creature sees the player, Huggy Wuggy gets even angrier and becomes even more ferocious, trying to break down the door to both eliminate the intruder and get revenge for everything the player did to him. since he nearly killed him. If we look closely at Huggy Wuggy, we can see that he no longer has his left arm. He has many scars and wounds all over his body, and on the right side of his abdomen, there are exposed organs, or what appear to be his intestines. He also has several stitched wounds and tape holding him together and keeping him functional. Likewise, a piece of his head is missing. All these characteristics give Huggy Wuggy an even more terrifying and macabre appearance, looking like an implacable and brutal monster. This is where Chapter 4 ends, hinting that this might be the final one. It's strongly suggested that Huggy Wuggy was rescued after his fall, crawled through the ducts of the Bunzo doll factory during the events of Chapter 2. It's implied that it was the prototype who saved Huggy Wuggy's life, perhaps using the poppy flower to heal his wounds, patch him up, and leave him functional, threatening, and brutal again. We can assume that the prototype decided to save Huggy Wuggy instead of killing and fully assimilating him for one unique and very specific reason. Unlike Mommy Longlegs or Catnap, whom the prototype assimilated into his body after they failed him directly and could no longer serve a true purpose for him, Huggy Wuggy, despite all his wounds, wasn't left in such bad shape. His main purpose was to be an unstoppable and relentless security mechanism, and he could still fulfill that true purpose for which he was created. Huggy Wuggy still wanted to protect the Playtime Co ward facilities from any intruder or anyone who shouldn't be there. It's most likely that the prototype decided to repair him and not kill him yet, because Huggy Wuggy will play a very important role in the prototype's plan, which is quite complex and we don't fully know yet. At the very least, he has Huggy Wuggy to protect the laboratories while he carries out his secret work. That's why Huggy Wuggy returns, and the prototype repaired him and chose not to kill him, so he could serve him one last time. On top of that, as we know, Huggy Wuggy is the main mascot of Mob Entertainment, the game's developers. Due to the positive impact he had on people and gamers since 2021, it would have been a waste of potential not to bring him back directly, and not just as Nightmare Huggy, which was a cool and macabre hallucination, but nothing more. Although this is my interpretation of what happened to Huggy Wuggy, it's important to mention that some fans believe he really did die at the end of the first chapter with that brutal fall, since many say that after hitting his head and bleeding, he doesn't move again. According to this theory, Huggy Wuggy's body fell and stayed in the area where the Bunzo dolls were made, and it was there that the prototype quickly found him and took him. But instead of consuming and assimilating him, he tried to heal him, or rather repaired his wounds as best he could, and then, using the properties of the poppy flower and some special discovery we don't know about, brought him back to life to serve him again. While this theory also makes a lot of sense, I think it's ruled out by some cryptic comments from the creators of Mob Entertainment about what happened with Huggy Wuggy. They say that everything unfolded like in Star Wars. Huggy would be Anakin, all badly wounded. The player or protagonist would be Obi-Wan, and the prototype would be Emperor Palpatine, who heals him and gives him a second chance, so he can now unleash his revenge against the protagonist. Thus, Huggy, like Anakin who becomes Darth Vader, returns even more powerful and brutal. And well, this is everything we know about how Huggy Wuggy returned, and why the prototype didn't kill and assimilate him like the others. Honestly, I think this topic is one of the coolest and most epic things that I absolutely loved about the end of Chapter 4. I wasn't expecting us to see Huggy Wuggy again directly in this chapter, and since he didn't appear in 2 or 3, where he isn't even mentioned at all, I thought they'd reveal him in Chapter 5. This really thrilled me, not just because we saw him again, but because my theory was somewhat fulfilled. A gaunt and injured Huggy Wuggy who looked more grotesque and terrifying because of all his wounds. I also loved that it's the same one we faced in Chapter 1, since I adored that he recognized the player, got even angrier upon remembering him, and became more ferocious, seeking revenge for what he did to him. Truthfully, I'd love for Huggy to turn good in Chapter 5 and help take down the prototype and all the nightmares in Playtime Co. But let me know your opinion in the comments below. Did you already know how Huggy Wuggy survived and came back? Were you aware of the reasons why the prototype probably didn't kill him? And finally, do you want Huggy Wuggy to be a full-on villain in the next chapter? Or like me, would you prefer him to become an ally? Comment your answers to these questions and your general opinion about how Huggy Wuggy survived and returned in the entertaining Chapter 4 of Poppy Playtime.